Hello everyone, I'm LazyGrounds and today we're gonna talk about all the units and mechanics of the Beastmen in SFO Grimhammer 2. First up, they got Godgors, which is a gore unit blessed by one of the Chaos Gods. There's a Godgor variant for each of the 4 gods and they all have different stats and abilities that reflect which of the gods mark they got. The Khorngors are your heavily armored anti-infantry murder machines that you expect of Khorn marked units. They got good armor and melee defense so they can stay in the fight for a long time, and with a high melee attack, damage and bonus versus infantry, they can shred through enemy infantry. They don't have the greatest AP, so they can struggle a little bit against very high armor units, but if they start losing a fight and they start getting low in HP, they will just get their second win with blood sacrifice, which lowers their armor but increases their attack and damage, and they become even more deadly. The Pestigors are your gross, disease-ridden gores marked by Nurgle, and they're your tanks that slowly whittle the enemies down. They got decent armor and good melee defense, insane health, and poison to debuff the enemy damage, so they can hold insanely long. But they got the lowest attack and damage among the marked gores, but they're not used to deal damage fast. Their role is to hold the line and either slowly grind the enemy down or wait for allies to attack them from the rear. They also got some utility with bolstered armor, which gives armor and resistance to allies, so your units gets tankier by just being near them. They also have rotten regeneration, which gives them regeneration, but only while not fighting, so if they rout and come back, they'll come back healthier, but it won't help them while fighting. The Slangors are your fast and deadly gores marked by Slanesh that's all about flanking your enemy, and as expected, they're the fastest with the highest damage among the marked gores. But they also got the lowest health and melee defense, so they're the squishiest marked gores. But they got Vanguard Strider and the ability Unseen Beast, which gives them stock and vigor as long as no enemies are within 100 meters. This allows them to sneak up on the enemy army and hit the backline units like archers or artillery, which they can demolish in seconds with their great damage and attack. They're also a great tool against heavy armor with their high AP, but units with high damage can take them down fast with their mediocre defensive stats, so you gotta be a bit careful with who they fight. And the Tsangors are gores marked by Tzeentch, and as expected, they're the only marked gore with a ranged attack. Their ranged damage is pretty standard for an archer unit, but with most of the damage being AP with magic damage and shield breaker, so they can do some pretty significant damage against high armor and physical resist units. But they're still gores, so they're pretty good in melee combat as well, with melee stats only slightly lower than the other gore units. They also got Hunger for Magic, which increases miscast chance for caster in range and lowers leadership and magic resistance of enemies in range, so they can deal some extra damage and rout enemies a little bit easier. The Gores aren't the only ones who's been blessed by the marks of chaos, because the generic beast lords have also gotten the marks, which is available in their skill trees, and it changes up their stats to reflect the mark and the same abilities that the Godgors get. So it's kinda like having a new lord type for each of the gods. The Hounds of Pestilence is a unit of large, deadly, poisonous hounds with good attack and damage stats with deadly poison and anti-large, so they can be really deadly against the right targets. And as hound units, they got Vanguard and are really fast, so they can maneuver around and pick their fights. They are pretty squishy though, with low armor and melee defense, but they got regeneration, so if things start looking a little bit dicey, they can disengage and recover. They also got Monster Presence, which gives allies leadership and vigor, and Bestial Pack Tactics, which slows enemies down to make them harder to run from. Next up, we got the Mutated Warhound, which is a huge single entity hound, and it's a legendary unit exclusive to Construct One Eye. And like the Hounds of Pestilence, he's incredibly deadly with great attack, damage and charge bonus, but it's also very fragile with low health, armor and melee defense. But it's got Discourage on attack to lower leadership, Fear to lower it even more, and Bestial Reckless Hate, which lowers leadership even further and debuffs melee defense, and with Terror on top of all of that, it can rout units really fast, especially with a good rear charge. But that's not what makes it special. What makes it really unique is the mutations. At the beginning of combat, you choose one of 3 mutations that last for the entire battle. Scaleskin gives it a bit more armor and physical resistance at the cost of attack if you want it to be a bit more tanky. Ripjaw gives it a bunch of bonus versus large at the cost of speed if you needed to hunt down something large. And Stinger gives it a bonus versus infantry, stalk and unspottable at the cost of armor if you needed to kill infantry. So it's really versatile and can adapt to most situations, but it's still very fragile with its low health pool, so if you're not careful, it can go down pretty fast. The final recruitable unit is the Wild Dragon Ogre, which is a legendary unit exclusive to Morgr, and it's an offensive powerhouse. It's got a great attack, charge bonus and damage with good AP and 100 bonus versus large, so you can just point this guy towards a large unit and he will go and flatten it. He's got pretty mediocre defensive stats though, with medium armor and melee defense, but if he gets swarmed and needs to get away, he got Earthshake, which causes an explosion that deals damage and pushes enemies away to let him disengage easier. He also has Monster's Presence to buff allies with leadership and vigor, and Bestial Monster Dominance to lower enemy vigor. There's also the Defiled Crows, which is only available as a summon with Malagor from his ability Crowfather, which causes a powerful vortex and summons the Defiled Crows. They're a fast unit with good attack and decent damage with bleed to boost the damage a bit more, but they're fragile with no armor and low melee defense, but since they're a summon, it's not a big deal if they die, and they're great at shutting down ranged units in the back line. And that's all the units, so let's get to the campaign changes. So the very first thing you'll see when starting a new campaign is a dilemma that will allow you to move from your normal starting position to another corner of the world. You can of course stay in the standard starting position if you want, but if you choose to go on a vacation, you can start in either Southern Araby, Northern Nagaroth, or Western Lustria. Or in Taurox's case, Northern Old World instead of Northern Nagaroth. There's also some events that's been ported over from the Beastmen mini-campaign Eye for an Eye, which isn't in the vanilla campaign. There's also some new technologies, which is where you unlock the Godgors. There is one technology for unlocking each of the Godgor and a follow-up tech that buffs the Godgor that was unlocked by the previous tech. The buff for the Godgor is very powerful, but it slows down your research by 25%, so if you research too many of them, you will have a hard time unlocking other technologies. Once you've unlocked a Godgor, you need to build a Herdstone building to unlock the recruitment of the Godgor. Each of the different Herdstone buildings unlock a different Godgor. And speaking of buildings, there's also a couple of new Horde buildings to give your armies some bonuses on the campaign map. There's the breeding chain, which gives you a small amount of passive income and income from battles. The totem chain lowers the chance of plague spreading and lower plague duration, it increases research rate and gives you bonus horde growth. The sacrifices building chain increases enemy attrition when they're in the same province as you, it lowers enemy campaign movement range in the province and spreads corruption. And the raiding chain increases campaign movement range and income from raiding. There's also some new stances. The gathering herd stance gives your unit experience every turn, and the ruination stance gives you more siege towers, extra melee attack and missile resistance when laying siege. It does cost 25% campaign movement range to adopt, and you lose 25% of your post-battle loot, which is a significant part of your income, so you shouldn't use it if you don't need it. So most of the legendary lords got their own unique technologies and a horde landmark that gives them some thematic buffs for the lord's army. Khazrak's landmark is the ambusher chain, which lowers dread cost for unit capacity upgrades and increases ambush chance, leadership aura size and income from all horde buildings, which looks nice, but only one horde building actually generates income. But most importantly, the middle tier unlocks the mutated warhound, so it's worth it for just that. His technologies buff Khazrak and your normal units, and there are 8 categories with each category buffing 2 units bundled together. But you can only research one technology per category, and you have to have constructed a tier 3 Herdstone before you do. Malagor's landmark is a sacrificial grounds that lowers miscast chance and increases campaign movement range, defense when defending, unit speed and horde growth. And as expected of Malagor, his unique technologies focuses mostly on spellcasting and some very powerful army abilities. He also gets a dilemma every 30 turns where he can pick a prophecy that gives you a buff that lasts for 25 turns. Morgur's landmark is his corruptor chain, which increases your racing income, replenishment, melee attack in forest battles, and increases the attrition enemies take when you're sieging. And at the final version you unlock the wild dragon ogre. Morgur's technologies are very varied in their effects and gives you a bunch of different buffs ranging from campaign buffs, unit buffs and army abilities. But the most important mechanic that Morgur got in SFO is his ability to give Chaos Spawn dark gifts, which gives them some really cool buffs and abilities, and is a really interesting way of customizing your Chaos Spawn and makes Morgur really feel like he's the master of Chaos Spawn. You got Razor Sharp Claws for some anti-large, Chaos Armor which gives them some armor, Maniac Fighter which gives them Overwhelm which lowers enemy damage and reload skill on contact, Cloud of Flies which gives them a Mortis effect which also lowers enemy melee attack, and Fire Breath which increases their speed and gives them fireballs, and each of the models shoot a fireball so they can delete some units. Most of the upgrades come with a bit of a drawback, but they all have their use and definitely outweighs that drawback. And poor Taurox doesn't have his own landmark or any unique technologies, but he still got his momentum mechanic and special stance, so he's got his own thing going on. But that's all the units and mechanics of the Beastmen. If you want to see them in action, I got a Morgur campaign right here. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, consider leaving a like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!